what's going on? Welcome to another episode of the It's Needed podcast, where we discuss real issues involving law enforcement in the community. It's your boy, Harriet Tubman, founder of Verbage United, and I'm also joined by the one and only light-skinned wonder himself, Mr. Oh No, It's the Popo. What up, bro?
Man, y'all gonna hear about my day. I'm good though, brother. I'm good. I'm blessed. I'm gonna tell y'all about my day here in a minute, man. What's up with you?
Oh, man. Well, we got a special guest in the building. My man, Mr. Nwadike. Did I get it right? Oh, hey, yeah. Y'all thought I was gonna butcher that.
He's nervous.
Y'all thought I was gonna butcher that, but your boy showed up. You know, I show up. So my boy Ken, he's the founder of the Free Hugs Project, and my man is doing some phenomenal work. That's not an understatement. So thanks for being on with us today, bro.
No problem.
He drove to us from the Dago today. So here's a funny thing, bro. Ken shows up to my house, right? Mm-hmm. He walks in. He's like, "Man, you live in the boonies." I'm like, "I live in the boonies. You live in the boonies."
San Diego is not the boonies, just so that everybody understands.
Oh, hey, that was a hate though, just because I can't live by the water, bro. Shoot.
Yeah, he lived close to the water.
I'm right there.
Yeah, hey, we live over here, so we don't get hit with no tsunamis, just in the case of an earthquake. All right. That's my excuse of why we live over here.
That's why I'm in Ohio. I don't gotta worry about that.
Yeah, they got what y'all got over
hurricanes,
there?
tornadoes, all that.
And snow.
Tornadoes.
Is it snowing out there right now?
Nah, there ain't no snow on the ground. But you go to like Cleveland, they got a couple inches.
Nah,
bro. I was in Denver, Colorado this past week, and it was snow, bro. And I told y'all, bros don't do well in the car.
Nope.
I will say though, I met the first black guy ever
in Colorado.
No. He's like, you met the first black guy.
He exists.
No, I know, right? I met the first black guy ever that actually preferred cold weather over hot weather. I was like, okay, you an anomaly. Because
he's not from the motherland, I'll tell you that. That's one of them other brothers.
Yeah, bro, I looked at him when we were in the class. He was like, "Nah, I prefer cold weather over hot weather." I looked at him like, "Dog, are you serious?"
Like, stop lying, bro. Yeah. No, you don't.
Nah.
Oh man, so thanks for both you guys being on the podcast today, man. I truly appreciate it, man. Ken, man, how's it going for you, bro?
Good. We just staying busy, man. My wife and I have 5 kids now, and so we were just talking about earlier how very little sleep, and so I try to function on whatever I can get, and hanging in there.
Bro, Ken with his 5 kids gives me no excuse, bro. like
Listen.
Usually I be saying like, "Oh yeah, I got 3 kids." He came over like, "Yeah, I got 5 kids." I'm like, "Dog, I should feel ashamed of myself." I got no excuse no more, bro.
You know what's funny about this is before Shelby got pregnant, all of my friends who have kids were telling me like, "Man, you gotta knock your wife up, man. You gotta pop a kid out. Like, it's the best thing ever. It's the most rewarding thing ever." The moment we announced that she was pregnant, people was like, "Yeah, we got you. Just wait. Wait. Welcome to the No Sleep Club."
Oh,
no sleep,
bro. And if he's one that doesn't like to sleep, bro, stand by, bro.
Mm-hmm. He gonna sleep.
Yeah,
he gonna sleep.
You say that now. Until we do the first episode, we're gonna do the first episode after the baby's born, bro. And
bags under his eyes, dozing off.
You're gonna look like the president looks like after 5 years in term or 4 years in his first term, bro.
That's how I feel right now, by the way.
So what's going on, AJ? What's going on out there, man?
Man, I'm moving. I'm not in the middle of a move. I'm like 80% done moving right now, but it's been a long weekend. My aunt passed away kind of unexpectedly, so we had her funeral Saturday.
Sorry to hear that, bro.
Through things. I appreciate that, but it threw some things out of whack. So we were packing, and this is funny. Y'all gonna relate. Hopefully, y'all gonna relate to me on this. So me and Shelby are like polar opposites with a lot of things, right? So the way that she prepares and the way that I prepare, like 2 totally different things. Hey, this move was insane. Like I'm trying to throw stuff in boxes and she's trying to sweep. And man, listen.
So it was like the Clash of the Titans over there.
But why would you choose to do it while she's this far along in her pregnancy?
Man, listen. So there's a reason. Like we're in an apartment now. We're moving to a house. We're looking to buy a house, and we're not ready to buy yet. There's like a lot of things that just kind of fell into this. But hey, learn from my mistakes. Never ever do that.
Yeah.
Like having a kid and buying a house at the same time. I'm about to be broke.
Your face says it all, bro. Clash of the Titans. That's how it was with me and my wife when we were planning our wedding, dog. Like, I'll never forget that. Like, in my mind, the movies paint the picture that it's supposed to be this bliss time and the husband sits there and just, or the fiance just sit there just all happy and I like that one, honey, and this. And bro, my experience, the exact opposite. I was like, babe, now don't get me wrong. I love my boo, but I was like, I like this. She was like, no, I don't like that. And then when we did the guest list, it was like, oh, well, we got to put this person next to that person. This person can't be there. So, but I will say, man, it was a blast. I loved our wedding, man. It loved every second of it. But the planning stages of it, man, it was not as bliss as I thought it was going to be.
Was yours like that too, AJ? You're planning?
Listen. We had the biggest fight to date planning our wedding.
What?
And you know what it was over? Plates.
Oh, come on, man.
It was over plates.
Come
like
on.
we're doing the registry and we had already like been arguing this whole process. And she asked me, she goes, babe, what color plates do you think we should get? And I was like, I don't know, white? And she was like, white? And, hey, it went down. It went down. You'd have thought she slapped my mama or something. Like it was going down. But
so here's a tip. Here's a tip I could give people that are listening, because my wife and I, it was complete peace and solitude for the months leading up to it. So what we did was, right as soon as we announced and we started planning, that was when we went and bought that old beater, the 1972 Chevelle that you saw in the garage. And when we bought it, it was a rust bucket. And the plan was every day that I come back from work, anytime that we're going to discuss planning our wedding, we go in the garage and we work on the car. So I'm working on the interior. She's under the hood changing out the carburetor and all that. And like we're discussing who's on the guest list, what the color scheme and everything is going to be. So by the time we come back into the house and have dinner and chilling, we're dirty, we're grimy, and it's like, oh man, I'm just exhausted. We go to bed. That whole process was awesome. And then wedding day, we unveil the car, we drive off. It was such a smooth process. So I could have saved you a lot of headache. Had you have called me and said, Ken, talk to me about the planning stages. And I would have said, just get a hobby that both of you guys can do together, and it smoothed out everything, man. Don't make the planning of the wedding the focus. That's secondary to whatever else you're doing.
And that is exactly why we have Ken on this podcast today.
I am disgusted right now.
Mind blown. Me and AJ over here sitting, been trying to figure out Da Vinci's Code for 5 years.
But because you made it the focus, and
That's
so
true.
it makes it too easy to fight over that. Switch the focus to something else. We're grimy. I'm like, yo, I'm trying to turn the ignition. Are you sure you put the carburetor on? I tried it. Here, come see. And then we're talking about the plates.
Oh, see, you know what? Hold on. Let's save that, because that's gonna be the topic for today. Not weddings, but fixing stuff in society between law enforcement and the community. So in a second, I'm going to get to why Ken is on the podcast. Before me and AJ got to pick our jaws up off the ground, because we just I'm still trying to figure this whole wedding thing out.
Yeah. And just so y'all know, Ken is the real deal. There's a lot of people out there that are doing good things, and you're like, oh yeah, they're good. Ken, this is proof.
Deal. Real deal Holyfield right there.
Drop the mic.
And just we ain't even been on the podcast but more than 3 or 4 minutes, and he's already dropping gems. So I appreciate you being here. Current events, you guys got to know that I love you guys as fans and supporters of our podcast, because right now, as we speak, the 49ers are playing. And if y'all know me, I'm a 49er fan. And so the mere fact that I'm missing the 49er game right now, that's love. So we are winning this 10-0. Current events. Last time we did the podcast, we talked about that. I don't know if you saw my video, Ken, when I was dancing at the school or whatever.
I did see it. Loved it.
Man, so last time we did the podcast, we recorded, I had just did that on that Friday. And so since then, the video has been released. And man, when I talk about viral, we had 1 or 2 other viral videos, but nothing like this, man. I didn't touch AJ's level. I just basically touched the bottom of his shorts on AJ's level. We actually finally had a video that actually went viral, and it was dope, man. It was a dope experience. And we talked about it before. It wasn't dope because the video went viral. All that tells me is that there's exposure of what people are understanding what we stand for and what we're trying to get. When something goes viral and you have a positive message, that's what it's about for me. Not for the sake of getting my name out there, nothing like that, because that's not what it's about. The mere fact that people know we're out there trying to change the world as we speak, that's what spoke volumes to me. And I've also said it before too, is the media in certain ways has gone out to, you know, contribute to the negative stigmas that we have in law enforcement, but we also get, you know, conditioned in a sense to think that all media is bad, and that's not the truth. And this was a prime example, man, that so many media, so many networks from across the world actually picked up that story and aired it. And that just showed me that, you know, they're there to put out also positive messages and positive nuggets out there for people to realize that there is hope. And so, you know, shout out to every single news network that, I mean, I got hit up from everybody, bro. NBC, ABC, Inside
Fox.
Edition, Fox, CBS. I mean, you name. I did an interview today for it, and we're still a week and a half out from it. So,
Nice.
yeah, it was just cool, man. And shout out to everybody that supported that. There's this one guy right now, this little troll on Instagram, and it's funny because our followers have been beating him up, but he's so ignorant as far as the video is concerned. He's not even a police officer, but he's like, oh, you know, you're dancing, and my taxpayer dollars are going to you dancing. And I'm like, bro,
I appreciate it, partner.
and it's funny. I had a dope response too, but my wife was like, "Hey, babe, take it down." Like she was like, you know, your followers know that you try to promote kindness and unity and stuff like that.
You went for his throat.
Oh, bro, I was like, hey, so what I wrote to him, I was like, I said something like, "Hey, man," I was like, I think your mom yelled the meatloaf is ready. So why don't you put your laptop down, go upstairs, and go eat?
Right.
She was like, I was cracking up.
My wife definitely would have said, "Take that down now."
Yeah, that's what she did. And that's why I'm married to my boo, man. She keeps me grounded sometimes. And I want you guys, if you guys are listening to it, to this podcast, like, just know, like, me, Ken, AJ, we're still human. Like, you know, there's still people that get underneath our skin that make us mad. But you also have to think clearly in your response to people, because you can't, you know, rise to their level, or actually you can't go down to their level. Go down to their level. And so I'm telling you guys that to say, you know, there's ways to fix the condition that we're in, and it's not by going down to their level, it's by rising above their level. So that being said, Kim, man, tell us about who you are, what you do, man, and then we'll get into our topic for today.
Yeah. So my organization is the Free Hugs Project, and it's interesting. A lot of people say they know me or they've seen me because of a video where I was either hugging the police or hugging people at like a riot, a rally, protest. But what a lot of people don't understand is that's very surface level of what my work is. My work is actually intended to de-escalate violence during unrest. So whether it's riots, protests, rallies, when I'm out there, even though my shirt says Free Hugs, I'm definitely not naive enough to think, oh, let me go into this conflict zone and just start hugging everybody or getting people to sing Kumbaya. That would be foolishness. My intent when I go out to those places is to get people to discuss the hard parts of the conversations that many people try to avoid, or to get people just to acknowledge the necessity of civil discourse or dialogue on the front lines. As someone who grew up in the 1992 Rodney King riots in Los Angeles, at the time I lived in a homeless shelter downtown LA. So I'm watching everyone leave the homeless shelter to go out and riot and protest and loot, right? Bringing stuff back into the shelter. And during that time, when we're in the shelter, we're poor, obviously, and we're asking our mom, how come we're not out there taking stuff either? And she's like, well, because I want to raise you guys to be better than that. Why would you guys want to destroy your own community? Because after everything is gone from them stores, who's going to rebuild it? And so instead, she started teaching us about the work of Dr. Martin Luther King. So I became very fascinated with him and people like him at such a young age. Of course, I couldn't do much about it back then, but so now I've grown up to get to a point where it's like, when I see those things happening, when I see people attacking each other on the front lines of riots or protests, or even worse, when you think Ferguson, Charlottesville, you could go down the list, even Charlotte back in 2016, riots that have escalated to that point where people are beginning to attack one another and go in and loot from stores. I'm the guy that shows up and starts talking to people about the decisions that they're about to make or are already making. And so people that look beyond the surface of my work, they realize, oh man, he's actually like really doing that. They're the sort of people that have reached out to me even during this unrest that's been taking place in Hong Kong for the past 24 weeks. They're like, man, Ken, when are you heading out to Hong Kong? Because they realize his work is not about hugs. His work is about trying to get the protesters to stand down, and then especially in Hong Kong, even talking with the law enforcement officers out there about the excessive force that they're using on the front lines. They just shot a dude recently,
Wow.
killed him, shot him in the stomach or in the chest out there. I think a college student even during this unrest. So that would be the sort of times where when I show up, I would tell those officers, can you give me just 10 minutes? Let me talk to them about why they shouldn't be throwing these bricks, right? And so I've had to do that a number of times. Actually, the Democratic National Convention back in 2016, there's a video out where the police, they were coming off of a bus in riot gear, and they were about to open this gate to unleash on these protesters who were acting unruly. And there's a video where I go over to the gate to whoever the commanding officer was at the time, and I was like, please just give me 10 minutes before you guys open this gate, because I know what's going to happen if you guys come through this gate. It's about to be mayhem right now.
To go down.
You know, and so right away when I turn around to the biggest guy that's out there on the front lines, and I'm like, hey, can you help me just calm people down for a little bit? So that's the real point and purpose of the work that I do. But again, people only judge you by your viral video, and so whenever they see me, they're like, yo, you're that guy that hugged the police. I'm like, that's all. Come on, 5 years straight.
That's all you got. That's all you got.
5 years I've been out there grinding, dodging literal bullets. That's what you saw. But I'll take it, you know. I mean, if that's what
But they remembered you
for sure.
And that's, I think, for me, you know, we all have these staple things. AJ's done so many different things, and you've done so many different things. But that's what, from the marketing major in me, because that's what I majored in college, was marketing. That's what draws people in. But when they get to you, they see there's so much more that's just beyond that dance video I did, or so much beyond just you hugging somebody, or so much beyond AJ doing a rap video with somebody. It's so much deeper than that. And so, one, bro, first of all, I want to thank you, bro. Like, you know, because the work that you're doing is phenomenal. Thanks. And it really is changing the world. And so, AJ, man, so let me tell you guys really quick, briefly, how I met Ken. And it's just funny how God works out everything. So
yeah,
I've told you guys about how I met AJ. I met AJ through a speaking engagement that I did about 1.5 years ago. I went out there, me and AJ met, and then that same Sunday is when I met Eric Thomas, and who I have a good relationship with now. And then, you know, fast forward, AJ and Ken had already knew each other from other events that they did. And so AJ connected me with Ken. And so it's funny that how just everything works around full circle. And one of the things ET always speaks about is, you know, success breeds success, or success attracts success. And since we've been on this journey to really change the world, God is putting all the pieces in place, the people that we're changing the world with, because this is not a one-man mission. It's a coalition, you know what I mean? And so I just feel honored, one, to speak with both you guys, man. I even feel honored just to have Billy here to record this, because even the way me and Billy got connected was just amazing. So I say that as encouragement for anybody that's going through things, or wants to change the world, or wants to change the current space that they're in. Keep grinding, because, you know, God sees what you're doing, and when God sees that you're doing the work for Him, the puzzle pieces will just naturally come together. So, I mean, AJ, I know you got something, a lot of stuff to say, because, I mean, you guys have met before. He and I did.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to elaborate on what you just said, Ryan. Even speaking from like a biblical standpoint, like iron sharpens iron, right? Like we've heard that like multiple times. So, you know, it's just to touch on that a little bit more. But the second thing I want people to understand is, please know that this is our passion, and that a lot of times you see the fruits, right? Like you see the rewards, you see the viral videos, but my man Ken has like bulletproof gear, like gas mask, like he is really out here getting it. And Ken, I mean, I'm sure you could share these stories, like where you've been pepper sprayed, like you said, you've been out here dodging rubber bullets. So it's easy for someone like you said to see a video you going out here having hugs, or giving out free hugs, and, you know, playing the peacemaker, for lack of better terms. But like, you are really putting yourself in harm's danger.
Absolutely.
Or in
harm's way,
whatever. I'm trying to say, I'm tired.
Yeah.
But you know, you're out here in the thick of it.
Absolutely.
And you do it day in and day out, and you will continue to do it because you believe in the mission. So I just want people to understand that, like, when you find something you truly believe in, you're all in. There ain't no half, 1 foot in, 1 foot out type of deal.
No, it's true. I mean, because people often ask, like, aren't you afraid? And especially as someone who has a large family, when you go into harm's way like that. But like you said about passion, when you're walking in your purpose or in your calling, you feel like you're covered in that space anyway, right?
Yep.
So I don't go into those situations thinking, oh, but what if, right?
Yep.
Instead, I'm thinking, well, who was called to go to those places, who was sent, and when you feel like that's your duty, that's your responsibility, the last thing I'm going to do is allow fear to prevent me from going into those places where I can create peace.
Bruh, so you just brought up something right now when you have passion and fear. Have you guys seen the movie Harriet?
Bruh,
No,
I've heard it is amazing.
Bro, you have to. So me and my wife went last week, and dog, that movie is phenomenal. Like
That's what I heard.
It is a must see, man. Like to see. I mean, we've all heard about Harriet Tubman and what she did, but it's another thing to see what she actually did and how she did it. And I encourage you, and this is a movie that I encourage everybody to go see, not just African Americans, but everybody, because it really shows what a faith walk is all about. It really shows what a passion walk is all about. There was something in that movie. So there's a point in the movie, and not to give all these spoilers away, but because you guys got to see it.
Don't ruin the movie for me.
There's a point in the movie where essentially, you know, all the people from the South were on to what Harriet was doing. And so they basically passed new laws that made it a point to where now everybody can go back, and anybody that has like a slave that's left, they can go out and look for him. Before that, if the slave left, then at that point in time, it was pretty much they're gone. They can go get their freedom. Well, when she was freeing slaves just by the hundreds, and they were like, hey, look, like we need to stop this. So they passed a law that made it to where they can go out and find the slaves. So when that happened, first of all, Harriet, she was not that big of a woman. She was a short woman, and when she made it out of slavery on her own, and from where she left to where she made it to, she went to Philadelphia. It was hundreds of miles, and so when she made it there, the dude when she got there, the dude was like, "Man, like you did that by yourself," and she was like, "No, I did that with God," type thing. So, anyways, like she does it. So then, you know, after she's there in slavery, she's out of slavery for about a year. She gets her freedom, but she's just like, man, like, I don't feel right just being like, all my family's still in slavery. Like everybody's still in slavery, and I'm just here chilling. So she's like, I'm gonna go back and get them. And she was like, hey, can you help me? And the dude was like, nah, we're not helping you. Like it's a suicide mission. Yeah, you got lucky the first time, but you're not gonna do that again. So she came back with like 9 of her family members, and the dude was just like, wow, like she just did that. So they invited her to an all-man club, which was the Underground Railroad.
Is he giving away the movie now?
I am.
Listen to him.
We all know the story from history in school.
Hold on. I gotta say a point though. So there's this. Oh man, my bad, y'all. Hey, shame on y'all for not going to see the movie yet. Shame on y'all. So, anyways, they get back. So, anyways, they pass the new law, and then when they pass this law, everybody's like, man, like we done now. Like ain't no more freeing slaves. Like we got to leave here, and we've made it further. They're up in Canada now. And so where they made it to Canada to free the slaves, they would have to go hundreds of miles. Before, she was going about 100 miles on foot, mind you. She's going 100 miles on foot. So the distance that they were at now was about 600 miles. And so what she said was, she was like, they were like, we can't do this, Harry. We can't do this. And she was like, are y'all literally just going to let a little distance get in between us freeing slaves? And I was like, wow, like that was deep. So there was a few things that I took from this movie. I'm not going to give away no more of the movie, but whatever. But y'all, shame on y'all for not going to watch it. But some of the things I got was fear doesn't motivate relationships do. Hold on. Fear is your enemy. Trust in God. That's what she said.
Yeah.
She was like, fear is my enemy. She was like, my trust in God goes beyond that. So fear is my enemy. And then she risked death before going back. So she says, like, at one point, again, my bad, y'all, but at one point somebody tries to turn back, and she's like, nah, you ain't going back. Like, you're not going back. She was like, I will risk my life before going back to slavery. And so she was like, she risked death before going back to slavery. And then there's this one, I'm just trying to find, you never on your journey alone, walk it light. she was like, it's just me and the Lord and 100 miles to freedom. So my point in saying all of my point in saying all this stuff is like, Ken, the work that you're doing, the work that AJ's doing, like it is, there is times where it could get dangerous, but you said something that was so critical, which is passion will push you beyond any measure of fear. And so having that passion, you need to always remember why we do what we do. So I just got done speaking to police officers in Colorado, and here's the sad thing is like the class that I was talking about was recruiting the new generation and retaining police officers. Right now in our profession, we're having the hardest time recruiting new people for many reasons, perception and all other stuff, but we're also having a hard time retaining officers. And so the first question I asked the audience that I'm speaking to is, how many of you guys in here would like your son or daughter to be police officers? You know how many people raise their hand? 0. 0 people raise their hand. And so why is that an issue? If we're trying to recruit and retain officers, how do we plan to recruit and retain officers, but yet I don't even want my own family members to do the profession? That's an issue. And so having said that, we all need to remember why we do what we do, and the passion of what we do, or the passion that we have, is why we got into the profession. So Ken, let me ask you, like, you've obviously seen a lot of the issue in the discord, the discord between law enforcement and the community. What do you think is the fix to that?
Well, I mean, I think as you were reading some of those quotes right now, a quote of mine that I live by came to mind, and I think it's a clear answer to your question. Is I live by a quote: "Fear and hatred will cease to exist when love is in abundance." And so if right now we're living in a period where there is fear and or hatred on both sides, right? Like that's very clear and obvious when you're going through social media posts, when you see the viral videos, there is a obvious us versus them divide, right? And that could only be created by either fear or hatred. So the work that we all do is intended to create more love, create more understanding and empathy, right? Whether it's the conversations that you guys both have with people through the work that you do, the conversations that I have with people on both sides of the aisle, whether law enforcement or activists, when I'm out on the front lines or when I'm out talking to young people, the purpose of everything that we do, whether it's even like you going viral dancing in a video, or either of you guys dancing in a video, you're showing that you're a human being who is also in need of love, just like the people who are watching these videos. So I feel like the most obvious answer, it just comes down to that, right? It's love versus fear and hatred. People will fear or hate what they don't understand. And I think in one of my most viral videos, when I was talking with people on the front lines, where I had to make it clear that beyond that uniform, they're human beings just like you guys. And you don't want to be judged for the color of your skin just the same way they don't want to be judged just because of the uniform that they're wearing out here on the front lines. And one of the young people, he made an interesting point where he said, yeah, but the color of my skin, I can't change that. I can't take that off. And some of the conversations that we had off camera was their desire to fix their communities. They can't just turn that off, right? Some people are raised that way, in the same way that I'm raised to want to fix things in my community. I'm telling you, when I'm watching this unrest take place in Hong Kong for the past 24 weeks, I'm like itching. I need to be out there, right? And my wife's like, no, the language barrier, like there's a lot of other reasons why it's not a good idea you going out there. But that's how much my passion exists to be in those places. And so I think the most obvious answer, what creates that very obvious divide, it's fear combined with hatred. If you take away the fear, right, like the fear that people have of law enforcement, which in some senses it's justified, right? Even myself as a black man, I get nervous and afraid anytime that I get pulled over. I've spoken to cops who are like, yo, I'm the same way when I get pulled over, right? And so we know that a lot of that, it's what we consume in the media. There's these one-off incidents that people tend to exaggerate and put so much focus on that. But most of the time, I would say just about any run-in that I've had with law enforcement has always gone positive if I treated it that way as well, right? So anytime that I respond respectfully, I'm given that same respect. And but when there's fear there or there's hatred there, sometimes it can cause people to act a certain way. They can turn something as simple as a traffic stop for such a minor reason. It could escalate it to become something else. So I hope that more people would take a step back and really ask themselves when they're in an interaction like that or in an uncomfortable situation, are they entering that situation with fear? I'm afraid of who I'm about to interact with, or do I just not like them, right? Because then that's the hatred.
Yeah. And I think one of the hard things, and tell me if you disagree, AJ, from the officer standpoint, is that I truly believe we live in a society now where it's hard to distinguish what we're actually dealing with. Are we dealing with somebody that has fear of police? Are we dealing with somebody that has a hatred for police? Or are we dealing with somebody that just wants to go viral? Because
I think the third, that's probably, I hope that, I've never even considered that, but I hope that's not how people are thinking these days.
But see, and the crazy thing is, the reason I think that way is because before and we've talked about this before on this podcast, but before, you would see somebody, like if somebody was dying, like your natural instinct was to go help that person.
Mm-hmm.
But now the natural instinct is to now pull your phone out and record it, because there's a sense of, I got to be able to capture this and put it out. And I've seen it to where if I'm trying to deal with somebody on a traffic stop, I can genuinely tell when they're making a rise out of the situation just because they want to stir something up when there's really nothing there. Where on the flip side of it, there's actually people I've gone out with, and I need to respond to the guy, but there was an officer that hit me up and was like, man, it was a white officer, and he went out with a black guy, and he was like, I can honestly sense this person's fear. Mm-hmm. And so there's a reality that officers have to see on one end, where there are people that are legitimately fearful of police.
Absolutely.
But on the flip side of that, what the community has to understand is there are people that are genuinely trying to just cause some type of chaos. Wow. For the sake of putting a viral video out there, because they want that 5 seconds of fame. Because think about it, fame has never changed. Fame has been the same since day one. It is a drug, and people want how they want that 5 seconds of glory. And the one thing that we know now is that if you have a bad run-in with an officer, this has the potential of going viral, and not only going viral, but money behind it. There are more agencies and cities that are more willing to settle a lawsuit than actually to take it the whole way, because it's just cheaper to settle as it is to see it through. And so that's the hard part for me, is like, I think now with the creation, like as great as social media is, as great as technology is, I think we have this third battle now, not just with fear, not just with hate, but the person that is doing stuff for vain promotional reasons. And would you agree with that, AJ?
I would. And this reminds me of a story. So I don't know if this was a year ago, 2 years ago, but it was at some point we pulled over a car, or we get called to a house. I'm not sure exactly which one it was, but there was a mother and a young child. The child had to be like around 5 or 6. It was a black family. So me, 2 other officers respond to the run, whether it was a traffic stop or whatever. The 2 other officers were white. When we show up, the kid was terrified of the police. Like as soon as we showed up, this kid runs up to the mom, holding onto her pants, like screaming, crying. Like the closer we got, the more the kid was freaking out. We ended up handling the situation. We go back to the substation afterwards, maybe like 30 minutes after, and the officers were upset. And they're like, you know what? Like, this is what's wrong with the world. This is why people don't trust the police. That child's mother taught that kid to hate the police, and it's just not fair, because that kid's going to grow up to hate the police, and then that kid's going to have a kid, and that kid's going to hate the police. And I had to stop the officer and ask him, I go, what if that mother experienced something? What if that mother was targeted by the police, was beat down by the police, was pulled over, seen a police officer wrongfully kill somebody, anything, right? Like the list goes on. And that's why the mother thinks this way. And her being a mother, right? Mama bear's kicking in. She's like, hey, I'm going to teach my kid how to survive and to grow up. And part of surviving in the mother's mind now is to fear the police, to stay away from the police. I go, do you think that's legitimate for the mother to pass on to the child? And I think I might have shared this through on an earlier podcast. I'm not sure. But anyway, the officers were like, well, maybe or kind of. I'm like, listen, there's no kind of about it, right? Like if me, right? Like I'm getting ready to have a child. When this child enters the earth, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that this child grows up to become an adult, the best version of himself. I'm going to teach him everything that I've learned along my way. So you can't blame this mother for passing on what she has learned along her way, right? Maybe something happened to her grandmother, right? And we know what was going on back in those times, right? Like we just talked about a movie about it, right? And maybe that was passed on to her and she's passing it on to her daughter because it worked for her. So we break down the fact that, okay, it's acceptable. So then I asked officers, I go, okay, so now that you agree that it's acceptable that the mother passed that information down to her daughter, what can we do to help destroy that negative stigma? And then we started coming up with tangible solutions, right? Like people are like, well, you know, I guess we could be a little bit more compassionate. I guess I could have spent a little bit more time trying to talk to the kid. I could have gave the kid a sticker instead of automatically becoming upset and putting your guard up, like, I can't believe this kid doesn't like me. And, you know, I'm going to cuss the mom out and all this. It's just like, sometimes we're going to have to step up and be that love to destroy the hate and fear that's going on in this world. Right, wrong, or indifferent. We're going to have to swallow the pill sometimes, right? We're going to have to swallow our pride, set it aside and go, you know what? Maybe there's something here. Maybe I could be the light in this dark world right now and show some positivity in this negative area.
Yeah. So I have a similar story to that really quick where I was, or my wife and I were that mother bear, papa bear, and in how we were going to engage in that situation. So I was coming back from a talk. We're coming back from the San Diego airport, and there's a light over there. I forget the name of the street, but it changes really fast, right? So my wife was driving. I was in the passenger seat, had just got picked up. Right as we go through that light, of course, sirens come on. We get pulled over. I'm laid back, relaxed, because I was like, we didn't even really do anything. I'm not worried about it. Cop comes to the passenger door, asks for driver's license, registration. My wife hands it over as she's driving. As he goes back to the car to run the information, my daughter, who is sitting in the back, who I believe was 5 at the time, I look back over at her, and like she's so nervous that like her hands were trembling a little bit. And I was like, Savannah, you okay? And she said, I'm just really scared about the police. And I said, why? She said, because when he walked up to the door, I could see his gun right there, and I was scared he might shoot us. And so right away, you know, after, of course, comforting my daughter and letting her know, no, it's okay, that's not going to happen. But when the officer came back with the driver's license and registration, before he even had a moment to speak, I said, excuse me, officer, my daughter is in the back seat right now, very afraid of you. And I said, do you mind talking with her? And it was such an amazing interaction, because here you've got this white officer, I'm clearly a black dude in the passenger seat, right? And he stoops down to her level, right? My wife rolled down the back window. He's back there on his knee at her window, talking with her about how was school. You know, your mother or your mom and dad aren't in any trouble. I just want to make sure everything's okay. They went through that, like explained the whole situation to her, came down to her level. He talked about having kids. He talked about what's your favorite cartoon, all of that, right? So in that moment, he became a human being, not some dude with a gun at her window, right? So again, when we're talking about fear and hatred today, that just got dispelled. That got thrown away right there in that moment. My daughter got to leave there with a completely different perception of not only the police, but how to handle being pulled over. Wow. At 5 years old. Wow. Right? And so there's a lot that comes with that if we actually take the moment to educate rather than hate.
So that leads me to ask both you guys a question that, and I've heard this before, actually somebody recently just hit me up, but the verbiage that we use when it comes to doing traffic stops. And what people have said is, I need to teach my child, I need to teach whoever to survive a traffic stop. Do you think that, you know, almost perpetuates fear right then off the top, just by saying, I'm teaching you to survive a traffic stop? Or do you think that actually is good verbiage in saying, you know, and this is all just based on wordplay. And I think for this situation, I think it's big. Because personally for me, and I want you guys' honest opinions, but personally for me, I think when we say, hey, I want to teach somebody to survive a traffic stop, that automatically gives the connotation that I'm automatically here to try to kill you. When that's not the case. And that's just the way I see it. Because if I'm going to tell you, hey, Ken, I'm going to teach you how to survive, then that automatically tells you, okay, you're going into an environment that's about to be, chaotic and hostile. I need to teach you to survive. Or if I say, hey, AJ, I'm going to train you to survive, that automatically is going to tell you I'm going somewhere where I have the potential to die.
I think for some people, it's valid terminology because of what they've seen and what they've experienced, and it's a sad truth, right? So like my wife and I, we talk about just in how we're going to raise our kids. I don't know if we necessarily use the term survival, but we talk about how to make it home safely, right? And I guess that is still a form of survival, but I think part of that is because of the communities that we both grew up in. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. Obviously, there's a huge divide between the police and the people. My wife grew up in East San Diego, and so even though now we live in a San Diego suburb, and so we don't experience, we never see the police around in our communities.
That's where I'm trying to live, bro. We gotta make it out the hood. Over
Right.
I gave my boy Ken a Dixie cup today when he walked in. AJ got on me for that, but yeah, my bad.
But so when we talk about that, for some people, survival isn't just that you're gonna die. Survival could be, I don't want you to go to jail tonight, because you have an opportunity to de-escalate a situation or escalate it simply with a traffic stop, right? Like you could get pulled over and be like, what am I being pulled over for? Blah, blah, I know my rights. I'm filming you and doing all of these things to escalate a situation when it really could just be driver's license and registration. Boom, you hand it over. Because when you look at incidents like, let's say, what was a viral video that people were quick to judgment? The Philando Castile case, right? So Philando Castile, he volunteered that information that he had a firearm in the car, and then that whole situation just escalated to a point where it shouldn't have, right? So when people from my community are seeing those sort of things over and over and over, and we're hearing about it in the streets growing up, and then we see it in the viral videos, I think to some people that term, how to survive, I think that's valid for some people. Sure, you can't tell a kid who grew up, let's say in the community that I live in right now, tell one of the skater kids down the street how to survive a traffic stop. They're like, I didn't know I was gonna die at a traffic stop. Exactly. I didn't know I was gonna get arrested at a traffic stop. Right. So I think for certain people, our realities are different based on what we have perceived. Like AJ said a moment ago, you don't know what someone's grandmother saw, what their mother saw, or their parents saw. And sadly, people hold on to that. And so I think we have to do a better job, we as human beings, not even just you guys as law enforcement or myself as an activist, but we just as human beings have to do a better job at what people are shown. If all people are consuming is the negative stops in the media, and sadly, some people choose to find that, right? Like you go search someone's YouTube history, and it's like, why are you constantly browsing just for that junk, right? Because now your perception of the world is thrown off. It's like, how come you're not searching for the viral videos of these positive interactions? Sadly, that's not what some people want to find. So the more that we put that stuff out there, I think it reduces that tension so that people don't have to feel like they need to use the word survival. But I do think it's interesting.
And I think at some point we need to get to the point where we don't use survival. And I understand and I agree with, and that's what, as officers, especially if you're a white officer, and I'm going to say specifically white officers, and I rarely do that, but I talk to a lot of white officers and this is how they feel. I think at some point we have to get to the point where we have to start changing that verbiage. And this comes from so a little bit about me, Ken, is I didn't like cops either, because I had some of those negative interactions with people or those officers growing up. And so I can see where that, because my dad had the conversation with me, like, hey, when you go on a traffic stop, this is what you need to do. I think the conversation wasn't more so based on survival. It was more so just based on being safe. And I know it sounds so trivial, but now that I am the officer that does traffic stops, in my mind, I'm not rolling up with the mindset of, hey, I'm about to kill every person in this vehicle. Die. Exactly. Yeah. Somebody about to die. Right. Now, don't get me wrong. Part of my mindset is if somebody brandishes a weapon, somebody is going to die type thing. You know what I mean? Like if somebody, because at that point in time, now the conversation shifts at this is now who's going home to who. So I understand that part of it. But when we're talking about educating our children, I don't want my kids to be afraid of the police. And I think just that survival mentality, it almost makes you naturally afraid. And I get it. And we already have negative things going against us. I don't want to say necessarily negative, but when we do walk up with a gun on our hip, that is scary. It is scary. So I understand that side of it, but it's part of me just when I know we're saying, hey, son, I'm going to teach you how to survive this traffic stop. It automatically makes it sound like, and here's the crazy part about it is that I know in the other communities, like the white communities specifically, that I know that's not the conversation that is being had, which rightfully so, because there has been, if we go back to slavery days, there's a history, and that's what I try to tell a lot of officers. There's a history here, and that's why I recommend everybody go see the movies like Harriet, because that's when you get to understand like
other people's experience.
Shoot, this has been their experience. This is why they may feel that way. So, AJ, how do you feel on that topic as far as just, using words like survival and stuff like that?
So I made a video with a kid that I mentor, and this kid, he's gonna give me a heart attack. Like I've been in his life for, I don't know, probably 7 years now. He was one of the first families I met when I started patrolling with the department that I work for now. And we just clicked immediately. I've been there through the ups and downs. He's called me in the middle of the night, and I've gone out and picked him up and just rode around the block and talked to him. I say that to let you know how much I care about this kid. And one of my biggest fears is going to a run where he's hurt. Like it would destroy me. With that said, I was having a talk with his mother, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't listen to this podcast, so I'm gonna just put it out there. I was having a talk with his mother because he's at the age where he's driving now, and I'm so proud of this man, like the young man that he's become, just from where I first met him to where he is now. That I was telling his mom, like I would love to put myself in a position where I could buy him his first car. Like it would mean the world to me. And she's super emotional, just like thank you so much. And for me, it's the least I could do, right? Like I'm just so proud of this guy. But then it made me think. There's a lot of responsibilities that come with driving, right?
Absolutely.
Like, do you know better to not do drugs and drink alcohol and drive? Do you know better to not go to certain areas, that you don't belong, whether your friends are beefing with somebody else or there's a rivalry going on or whatever, right? My mind got racing. And for some reason, I know why, I decided to do a video with him on how to properly interact with the police during a traffic stop. I recorded it and it went semi-viral, right? Like people were sharing it and people loved it. People were super receptive to it. But that word got tossed around a lot, right? Like when people would reshare it, I would see that like, hey, watch this video. It's how to survive a traffic stop. And I didn't have an issue with it. And here's why, but I could. The reason I didn't have an issue with it is because that could be their reality, like Ken said. But something that would make me have an issue with it is if they're not using that same verbiage in situations where they should, right? So if you're teaching your son or daughter how to survive during a traffic stop, are you also teaching them how to survive during an altercation, right? Like when you teach these things, are you using the same verbiage?
Absolutely.
Because if not, you're transitioning that fear, right? And then like you said, Ken, like hate and fear, you're perpetuating that behavior, right? And we all know any confrontation, like whether it's a fight, whether it's bullying in school, how to survive properly driving,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Any of those things, like as long as you're using that verbiage across the table and not just towards police officers, I don't see an issue with it.
And when you put it that way, I agree 100%. And I think a lot of the reasons we're in the situations we're in is because, and I've said it before, is that we react based on our emotion. And so, we have to teach people, like as officers, one of the things that we're being taught now is de-escalation. But that's something that needs to be taught in schools, because that just goes into being a good human being is de-escalation. Like, we get so caught up in our emotions, and I guess for the longest time, and maybe it's never been an issue, or maybe just we're more aware of it because we see social media, but you wouldn't think that you'd have to teach de-escalation, but in a sense you do. And a lot of it goes back to, there's a book called The Boy Crisis, and it talks about, there's not a lot of fathers in the home anymore. And that's led to a lot of the issues that we have in society nowadays. And so when you're talking about a society where there's, even Kanye West was talking about it recently, is not putting our, not allowing our kids to get so caught up in, what Hollywood is saying and all this other stuff. We're not necessarily teaching people how to have conversations anymore, how to get, how to have, respectful conversations, or how to have cordial conversations. We're accepting people, we're allowing them, or we're becoming accepting of behavior that goes beyond just a normal conversation. Like, if I don't like what you say about me, Ken, like, it's okay for me to start getting crazy with you. And as a society, we're saying that's okay. You know what I mean? And that's not. And I think that's what we have to go back to, is we have to, one, be synonymous. Like I agree with that, AJ, is be synonymous. If we're going to say, I'm going to teach you how to survive a traffic stop, well, I'm going to teach you how to survive going to school.
It's a good word.
I'm going to teach you how to survive being bullied, as opposed to just using it in law enforcement. And so the one thing I want to go and bring all this back together is we said it before, is that one little act of kindness can change the world.
Absolutely.
And we have to get back. And that's why I love what Ken is doing so much, man, is because, bro, it's not that simple. And I think we overcomplicate things as humans, thinking like we need some scientific algorithm that's going to solve the problems, when it's really not that. It's not that difficult. Like, the three of us, think about if we laid everything out on the table of what we've accomplished in the short time of 5 to 10 years, we have probably changed a lot of people's mindsets, perspectives, saved people, everything. And that's just three of us. So imagine what everybody else can do. There's a quote that I love this. I love this quote. It said reality tells you what you can't do. And I thought that was so powerful, because a lot of times we always like, well, what's the reality? Well, this is the reality. This is a reality. Well, reality tells you what you can't do. And what that means is like everything we're doing, that's not a lot of people's reality. In their mind, we're living in, some, false world, and some, kosher world. And it's like, no, we've actually chose to say, hey, I'm going to do something that goes against the grain.
For sure. We're breaking the norm.
We're breaking the norm. And now that's becoming the new reality. And so we have to get into this point to realize and believe, like, no, we can go out there and change. And that's the unfortunate thing with police officers sometimes is, and I get it, but we got so ingrained in just thinking like this negative stigma, or having these negative stigmas about life, because we just go on all these terrible calls. And it's hard too, bro. Like, I went on a call now I'm back on patrol. So since I'm back on patrol, I'm seeing, a lot of the stuff I wasn't seeing before. And one of the calls I went to on Thursday was a guy that died in a motel because he drank himself to death. And he's an African-American guy, and he was 35 years old, and he died with a bottle of vodka in his arms. And so here I am just standing on this call, just, we have to make notification to family and stuff like that. And it's like, that's a terrible way to die. And so if you go to calls long enough as a police officer, you're talking about guys 15, 20, 25, 30 years.
It messes with your mind.
It could start to mess with your mind. And so, we just have to have a level of kindness. And that's why that's why I even love the name, just free hugs, man. People just need
an embrace. Yeah,
an embrace.
Man. Whether it's a physical hug or figurative, I think that's where we need to get back to. And something that I think people don't realize or take into account is the way social media is set up today. We all think that it's supposed to connect us. Like that's the goal, right? We have all these advancements in technology, but now you have everyone that's looking down at their phones, and rather than making real life connections with people, remember when we were young, if it was my birthday, you're hitting me up, you're coming to my house, we're having a celebration. Now they won't even write the whole sentence happy birthday on your wall. They're just gonna put 3 letters HBD. Like that's how far we've become as a society, when people are like, what do you mean I hit you up on your birthday?
Wow,
I put HBD on your wall. How am I supposed to respond
and not only that, back in the day, you actually had to remember their birthday.
For sure.
Now Facebook lets you know, like, hey,
tell
it's
you.
AJ's birthday today.
So it's so insensitive now, right? It's so false and phony. You know what I mean? It's saved us a lot, right? Yeah. But at the same time, it's like it's almost like a quick chore. Oh, the notification pops up, HBD, and then that's it, right? So people are feeling more isolated, more disconnected. And so when you talk about that one act of kindness, just stepping in and greeting somebody, genuinely asking them how their day is or what's going on in their life, right? Like me, even if I'm on a traffic stop getting pulled over, like after I've given up the information, I'm like, how's your night going, officer?
Exactly.
Right? Because that's a human being to me.
Exactly.
And sometimes sometimes just that simple interaction will cause somebody to be like, you know what, that I'll let you off on a warning. That was a simple mistake.
Wow.
But that's not the reason why I do those things. Is one, I understand how difficult the job is that you all do as officers. And so what I try to educate young people on, especially as someone who is constantly around the activist community, is to try to get them to understand, like you said, seeing the sort of stuff that you guys see day in and day out, day in and day out, after a while, that's going to mess with your mind. And then on top of that, not only seeing those things, but dealing with the hardships of life, right? Like one of my best boys, Chris, Officer Frunze out of Charlotte, North Carolina, dealing with 2 young sons being diagnosed with cancer.
Oh.
And then still going back to work, right? 2 young sons under the age of 6 or 8? 2 young sons. So he's been in the St. Jude's Hospital the past 8 months dealing with that. And then you have to go back to work, right? How do you deal with that? The trauma of when he's calling me like, Ken, if one of my boys dies, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he can confide in me and let his guard down and be vulnerable to me, but still has to put on that badge and go to work.
Bro, that's
difficult, right? So when I'm talking to people in the activist community who just swear that because you guys put on this uniform, you have these standards to uphold to and blah, 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 blah. Come on, man. It's a human being.
Yeah. You know what's, it just struck me, but I think it's super powerful and something that we should constantly remind ourselves is we have to educate ourselves in our own, right? Like we have to educate our own. So when I shared the story of the kid who didn't like the police and the police officers were going back and forth, something that I did is I put my pride aside and I educated police officers on why that may be going on. And then we had a discussion on how to properly move forward, right? And the officers set their pride aside. I set my pride aside to have a real and raw conversation. And then when you shared your story, Ken, about being pulled over and your own kid was terrified of the police, like instead of you blaming the officer or blaming the system, like you immediately said, you know what, I'm gonna set this aside. I'm gonna talk to my kid. I'm gonna educate my own and give the police officer opportunity to talk to my child to make sure that this is resolved.
And he had to set his pride aside to do that too, because some officers could have been like, what am I going to talk to this little kid for?
Yeah.
You know, so no, you're totally right on that about both sides needing to set their pride aside in those situations.
Yeah. And that's the tough part. Go ahead, AJ.
And just one more thing. When you were just sharing this story, you're talking to your peers, Ken, and you're sharing that information with your peers. Like, hey, I personally have a buddy that's a police officer and this is what he's going through. Like, can you imagine going through this and then having to go to work on a stressful job or on a stressful run or something like that? I think it resonates more when it comes from your peers or someone that's in your circle, right?
Absolutely.
And I think we don't do that enough, right? Like as police officers, I think there's so much of, man, the community doesn't like us. We're not doing anything wrong. And as community members, there's so much of, man, you know, police officers are out here killing minorities. We're not doing anything wrong. Instead of us taking a step back, putting our pride aside and going, you know what? Maybe this is why the community doesn't like us, or maybe this is what's going on. Maybe this is why police officers do X, Y, and Z, and then coming together after that. So that just kind of clicked with me.
And you know what's funny too is like, just like we've always said it before, as an officer, is like, these are the things I have to see, these are the things I have to deal with. But as an officer, don't forget, like there's members of the community that have seen just as much, if not more,
kids even
than what we've seen as an officer.
Yes,
you know what I mean.
Listen.
And so
the trauma.
Dang, is that the Cyrus? Is that your house or my house?
That's your house.
That's my house. Oh yeah, my bad. That's what happens when you live in the hood. You know what I mean? So
definitely not the hood.
You got kids sweating over there.
Everyone. Nah, it's definitely not the hood.
Hey, when you live in the hood, you know, every 30 minutes, you know.
Nah.
Yeah, but you just said something.
Go ahead.
No, you just said something. I was about to say something, but I forgot what you said.
Oh, so that's what I was saying is that, you know,
the trauma.
Yeah, these people,
for
some of these people in the community have experienced just as much, if not more trauma than we've experienced as police officers. And so we can't go out there and just assume automatically that, oh no, these guys don't know what I'm going through today. These things, they don't know what I'm dealing with at home. Like, yeah, like they don't, but at the same time, you don't understand what that person has gone through. And that's what I'm a firm, you know, preacher of, is that, look, like, we're all human beings at the end of the day. I don't know where you're at today. Like, I don't know what you're dealing with today. And going back to that guy that just passed away in the motel, you know, it's funny because, like, you know, me and my officers, my partners, we're just standing out there at this dead body call, just like it's another call. Like, and in my mind, I'm thinking like, man, this sucks. Like, this is terrible. Like, terrible way to die. My man just, you know, and the sad part about it is, like, we turned on his phone and the screensaver was a little child. So I'm assuming that he's a dad. And so, but for us as the officers, we've gone on so many death investigations that it just kind of becomes routine. Whereas, like, the lady, the housekeeper that found him, I can see she was a little bit, you know, she was a little traumatized by it. Like, she was a little struck because she's never experienced that before. So it's so easy to forget, like, hey, look, like, just because this has happened to me so many times doesn't mean it's happened to that person so many times, or vice versa. So that's why I think coming down to reality of the human side of things, like, we're all humans experiencing different things, is how we get away from some of that hate and how we get away from some of that fear. You know what I mean? Just realizing that we're all in this together. At the end of the day, we're all in this together. And the division, that's, you know, that's what people forget. A lot of this is spiritual. Like, Satan comes to divide people. Like, the best way to conquer a land is to do what? To divide and conquer. Absolutely. That's the best way to divide people. So when we stir up hate and fear in people's lives, what we're doing is we're creating division. And once that division is created, now it's easy. It's us versus them. And we have to get away from this us versus them mentality. And it's on both sides. Like, we can't sit here as officers and sit here and say that, hey, we're all squeaky clean. The community has a problem. They need to fix their problem. Like, no, we actually have issues within our internally that we have to fix as well. But we need peers like my man Ken on the flip side of it that can help us say, hey, look, and hold others accountable that are civilians and say, hey, look, just as much as officers are teaching de-escalation, we have to just as much be teaching de-escalation on our end. Because if we're not going to do that, it's like arguing. It's like, you know, we're all married here and we've been in arguments with our spouse before. And it's like, I can try to change, but if you ain't willing to change, then we ain't going nowhere. Like, that's why, you know, I went to a couples retreat one time, a therapy, or not a therapy, but a couples counseling thing. And they were like, the moment you start to argue with one another, stop worrying about what they're doing and worry about what you're doing. And 100% of the time, even if you know you're completely right, there's something still that you can probably fix to make that situation better. And if we take the focus to ourselves, then now, and so if I focus on myself, my wife focuses on herself, then now it's a lot easier to come to find a truce between the two. But if I keep pointing the finger, we're not going to find no truce. And that's what we need to learn to do. And that's why I think the work that all three of us are doing is just so powerful, because, you know, we need to have those that we can go to and say, hey, look, this is how I feel. Can you help spread my message type thing?
I'm always telling people that I'm working with that if you guys are so afraid of or don't like the police, then do a better job at policing yourselves. And people aren't willing to own up to that, right? Like, if we would police ourselves in the community, yo, this knucklehead over here, we know he's always doing hood rat stuff with his friends, then I'm gonna call him out for doing that, because they'll tell you straight up. You saw the viral video of the kid. I just like doing hood rat stuff with my friends. Okay, I'm gonna call you out for doing hood rat stuff with your friends. I'm not even gonna wait for the police to come and arrest that little boy.
Yes, exactly.
I'm gonna try to save his life, right?
Yeah.
And so I think in the community we need to be doing more of that, and that's why the work that I do, it's so important to me, because I feel like I'm that step before the police have to come in and check you for doing what you're doing, whether it's on the front lines or interactions that I have in certain underserved communities. I want to be that step, literally, like in their day-to-day lives, but also when things have escalated to the point where we're on the front lines. I'm just that buffer of peace before, once I step away now, things can get bad. Pepper spray can come out, right? Rocks or bottles can come out from the other side.
I'm trying to tell you, dog, like,
listen to me.
Don't be surprised
before it gets to that point, right? And so there's been plenty of times where I have got people to stand down in those situations, or when you talk about you guys are learning more about de-escalation, that's like the key thing on the front lines is how do you de-escalate this situation so that you can get these protesters to stop throwing rocks and bottles, you can get the police to not have to escalate the situation to where rubber bullets or tear gas or pepper spray or any of those things are coming out. A lot of that comes through dialogue. A lot of it comes through, sometimes somebody actually needs that physical embrace. There was a situation that happened right here in El Cajon when the riots were happening in San Diego. And there was this dude, he wanted to fight this cop, right? So we're on the front lines. Homeboy is taking off his shirt. And he's saying, why is this cop just staring at me like that, right? Like, so he wanted to charge at him. So as he takes off his shirt and he's starting to square up, right? Officer's got his hands on his weapon. He's ready to react if dude gets close to him. And right away, I go over and I'm trying to talk to dude. And I'm like, you really want to do this right now? You gonna square up with this cop right here in front of everybody?
Think about it.
Exactly. So I'm like trying to get him to think about what he's about to do. And then now, because I'm there, that's when people try to start getting hard, right? So now he wants to forcefully charge at the officer.
Hold me back.
Yeah. Hold me back. Exactly. That's exactly what it is, right?
Back.
You're lucky he's holding me, right? And so it went from holding him back to eventually gripping him up with a hug. And I was like, yo, man, you have a kid at home? I do have a kid. Your number one priority tonight, man, is to make sure that you make it home safely to that kid. Because you could end up in jail tonight. You could end up shot. So many things. If you think you're going to fight this cop on the front lines, and as I'm holding him, eventually he just starts sobbing, man. It's a grown man crying on my shoulders.
Wow.
And I was like, whatever it is that you were going through, man, like just let it go. But this isn't worth it,
bro. And people got to realize, like, we're humans, and that's why he was doing that, because he's we're emotional creatures.
There's things he saw, private experience.
We thrive off of emotion, and if you deny that, if you say no, that's not true, then you're wrong. Like, we are human beings. We were created to have bonds with other people. We are created to experience emotions with other people. There's a video, I don't know if you guys saw this video. It was a black officer who tells this white homeless guy to slap him. Have you guys seen that?
Oh yeah, I saw that. And then he bombs on him.
Bruh.
What?
Yeah, I saw that.
And there's a reason. So basically, there's this black officer, and he for whatever reason he's having a contact with, it looks like this white homeless guy. He tells he basically tells the white guy, like, hey, slap me. He's like, I'm giving you a pass right now. Go ahead and slap me. I'm giving you a pass right now. Slap me.
Wow.
So he got slapped.
Oh, he really slapped him.
He really slapped him. And as soon as he slapped him, the officer just bombed on him, bro.
Oh.
Like, bombed on him hard.
Oh, come on.
And so the issue is, but here's the crazy part, is we get so twisted and out of arms and bent out of shape when a white guy kills an unarmed black guy. This was a black officer doing it to a white homeless guy. So we need to come with that same energy.
Absolutely.
We need to come with that same energy because it's not about the color all the time. It's about it's about right and wrong. You have a guy that did something he shouldn't have did, and he beat up somebody that he shouldn't have beat up, and he basically incited that altercation that they had. So my point is that let's come with that same energy when we get mad that a white officer shot a unarmed black guy. That black dude hit somebody he shouldn't be hitting. And we're not getting a lot of this publicity. Now, there's a lot of people out there will still say, hey, look, this is officers doing something they shouldn't be doing, which is fine. And I'll stand up and call out the bad officers all day. But this is about right and wrong. And as much as, and I'll be the first to say that there are some racist people out there to this day. I'm not going to sit here and say that racism don't exist. I've said it many times. But at the same time, we can't always chalk everything up to race because it's just convenient. And that just irks me, because when we just chalk everything up to races, how do we really distinguish what is really truly about a racial issue? When this may have nothing to do with race, this may just have everything to do with somebody just doing something they shouldn't be doing. And so, we've almost, and it goes back to Harriet Tubman, it goes back to Martin Luther King, is those people specifically fought for civil rights because it was clear as day that there were racial issues that existed. If you were a black man, you had to use a colored water fountain. If you're a white person, you got to go into the white restaurant and drink from the white water fountain. Like, it was clear as day back then, and they fought night and day so that way we would have civil rights. But now people are using race as an excuse of why they can't succeed or why we can't move forward. When if Martin Luther King was here today, I guarantee you he would sit here and say, hey, look,
there's been plenty of progress.
plenty of progress since when I mean, the mere fact that we can have a podcast in a room, you know what I mean, with the white homie, the Savage over there recording, you know what I mean? Like, that's progress right there.
Absolutely.
So why are y'all complaining and sitting? It's like, go out and do something about it. Like, everybody wants to talk, but nobody wants to do.
Well, I think social media has also created keyboard warriors, right?
Oh,
People
man.
feel like their form of activism, it's just like getting upset about it and posting about it. And to me, that's slacktivism, or slacktivism. You're really a slacker. I did my job for the day. I shared this. I put it out there, right? So there's a clear difference between activism and slacktivism. And a lot of these people, they'll be the ones to call out the activist who is genuinely putting themselves in harm's way to try to create change, and they're like, look at this fool, look at how he's doing it. But what did you do? All you did was share a video and talk smack about a video. And so I think the more that we can get out there to try and create change, or try and make sure that we are continuing to make progress, because there are issues, you know,
100%.
For sure.
100%.
But of course, we are not where we were 30, 40, 50 years ago. We have made great progress, and we need to make sure that we're continuing to make progress.
Exactly.
And that's why conversations like this, dialogue like this, the things that you guys do as officers, and the things that you get to post on social media as even just as individuals, to create change and to make sure that there is more positive and clean content that exists on social media to help move people forward. Because think about it, if there were not people like us on social media, think about how much junk that is intended to divide would be out there. So there wouldn't be the sort of content that we put out that actually connects people more. Like, people would struggle to find that, right? If there was no AJs, no Ryans, no Kens, or people like us, right? We could go down the list of people like us, but it's not as much as what media, general traditional media, is going to be feeding, or some of these sites that know that they're going to get great engagement off sharing that negative viral video, right? We're up against that.
Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I'm good. I'm just saying that's what we're up against with the work that we do.
So I need to do the world and every single one of our listeners a huge favor. Ken, you do like motivational speaking. I'm sure you do way more. Can you tell everyone how to get a hold of you?
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely. Yeah.
please.
So I'm on Facebook, Instagram as Free Hugs Project. I think sometimes people search me up by name, Ken Nwadike, but it's I don't post on those pages much. Most of the time I'm at Free Hugs Project. And, I travel all over the country having these sort of conversations, especially with young people, so mostly at college campuses, because you get to reach them at that ripe age before they go into adulthood and start making some of these negative decisions that we're talking about, or I guess keeping their perception on track before they get corrupted by some of the things that they'll see in the media, or some of the negative stuff that people will tell them or share with them. Because I know even as I speak at colleges, sometimes there will be that radical activist that's going to come right behind me and almost try to undo everything that I just worked towards creating unity. And instead they come in on some crazy radical message that has these kids thinking, we need to, you know what I mean? I've had it happen like a number of times to where I'm getting calls sometimes from the school where they're like, Ken, we're going to have to bring you right back because we didn't know what this speaker was about to talk about when they got here, and just completely undoes all of the unity and peace and things that you're trying to spread on campus to bring people together. And that works for the right or left, right? Like you could have this super conservative speaker come in that has people thinking one way, or you can have a radical or someone that supports a certain movement too strong. And it's like, wow, what did the kids just consume when I just worked towards trying to bring people together? So that's very important to me, and that's why I make sure on my pages on the Free Hugs Project, all I post is positivity, because I think there's enough stuff that's out there intended to divide us, and we just need more people trying to unite us.
And I want to give the world some hope right now. So usually every single one of us has posted positive things on our accounts, and we always get negative feedback, or I mean majority of the stuff is positive, but we'll always get those negative, is the trolls. But I will say the video of me dancing, it's over 10 million views already. It's over 10 million, well over 10 million. And out of all of the comments, you can imagine how many comments are out there. We've only had one negative person that I've actually seen. He keeps going back, and he's one of those trolls. And just because of that, I want to call this fool out. So, yeah, I'm gonna put him on blast if I can find him, because he's been going hard. But the reason that's so cool is because out of all the positivity that, like, out of over 10 million some odd people that watch this video, I've only been able to come across one negative comment. So that gives us hope to know that people still recognize good work and good positivity and really want to see that, because, you know, it's sad to say, but you'll have a video like this that, you know, is very positive, but you'll have some folks beating each other up in Popeyes that will get 50 million views.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's some folks that, so I can't find his name right now. If I find him, I'm gonna call him out, but this dude is a troll. Billy knows who he is. So
he just need a hug.
That's it. He needs a
group hug. Let's just group hug.
So where we at on time, Bill? I know we're probably getting close to the end. Oh yeah. So one thing I want to wrap it up real quick is I was watching a video today, and it was you guys might have seen this. It was on Facebook, but Bill Gates was talking about, before he was Bill Gates, like the Bill Gates as we know him. He talks about how he went to the airport one time, and he was going to get a newspaper but didn't have change. Have you guys seen this video?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, so if you guys have not seen this video, it's pretty cool. But he talks about he didn't have change to get the newspaper, so the guy at the newspaper stand gave him the newspaper. And so he went back a second time to the same airport, happened to see the same guy. Bill Gates didn't have change again, and he was like, "Hey man," like, and Bill Gates was like, "No, I don't need to buy it, man. I don't have no change." And the guy was like, "No, take it. It's all good." And dude was like, "Hey, it's gonna come from my profit, so it's really not a loss to me." And Bill Gates was like, "Cool." So fast forward 18 years, Bill Gates, as we all know him, as one of the richest men in the world. Bill Gates tries to go find this guy to pay him back, you know, for the simple act of kindness of giving him 2 newspapers for free. So he finds him after about a month, he said, and he goes back and he says, "Hey man, I don't know if you remember me." And the guy was like, "Yeah, you're Bill Gates. You're the richest man in the world." He was like, "Yeah, I know that, but I don't know if you realize I was the guy that got a paper from you." He was like, "It was actually 2 papers."
Yeah,
My man was like, "Nah, dog, I gave you 2 papers, right?" So he was like, and Bill was like, "Yeah, man, I just wanted to show as to repay that kindness that you gave to me. I want to give whatever it is, whatever your wildest dream is, I want to do for you." And the dude was like, "How could you do that?" He was like, that you can't repay what I did for you." And Bill Gates was like, "Nah, bro, I want to repay everything you did for me." And the guy was like, "No, you can't repay there's no comparison." And Bill Gates said at that moment, that's when he realized that guy was rich, because he was able to give even when he didn't necessarily have. And so what that's told me was, and Bill Gates that's when he realized, like, having all the money in the world doesn't necessarily mean you're rich. Being rich is being able to give when you don't necessarily have. And it's not necessarily a financial thing. It's a kindness thing. And so, you know, what me, Ken, and AJ are trying to do is we want to, you know, leave our impact on the world through our acts of kindness to the rest of the world. And so, you know, if you're out there listening to this podcast, realize you don't need $1 million to go out there and change somebody's world. You don't actually need any money to change somebody's world. All you need is a heart to care for another person. All you need is an act of kindness. All you need is a simple hi and how are you doing? Those little simple acts of kindness, like I always say, can change the world. So that's my nuggets for today. Ken, man, you have any nuggets to leave us with today?
Man, I think that more people should just really make a conscious effort to step out and show as much kindness, love, and understanding, and knowing that we're up against the odds, right? Like I shared with social media, how a lot of the things that are on social media today are intended to divide us, are intended to stroke that fear and hatred in people. And so when we know that we're up against that, and we're at an all-time high with people struggling with mental health issues, people feeling isolated, anxiety, depression, and all of these things. I just lost a good friend recently, actually. There's a guy on, he's always out on Hollywood Boulevard. He dresses up in a Superman costume, and people go and take pictures with this dude. And for the past 6 years, he's been a friend of mine who literally has nothing. He's like a panhandler that stays out on the boulevard. So when you were sharing that story right now about Bill Gates and the guy with the newspaper, that's how I felt about this guy, Superman, because when I was organizing the Hollywood Half Marathon and I needed a costume, he's like, "I'll give you more than the costume. I'll be the guy in the costume."
Wow.
And so we became friends that way and connected. But sadly, his story ends tragically. It doesn't end like Bill Gates being able to go back and bless him by helping him out with the newspaper. Instead, because at some point last year, he was robbed for his Superman suit, and that's the way that he makes his money, right? So without his suit, he literally felt powerless, and so he ended up back out on the streets. But not only did they rob him for his suit, but they took his phone and everything else, right? So I couldn't understand why I had lost contact with Superman, and this dude really looks like Christopher Reeve's Superman. And so when I had lost contact with him, and then now, because when my wife and I, we had twins, so we weren't going back out to Hollywood Boulevard to organize this event that we had been doing for the past 6 years. And then I just recently got a message 2 weeks ago, from a friend of his who said Superman passed away tonight, and the way that he passed was, you know, those little clothing donation bins that you'll find like in the parking lot of Walmart or whatever. He was trying to climb in there to get a sweater and suffocated and died inside that thing. And so when you talk about extending that extra kindness and love and understanding for what people are going through, you never know when that person could be at the end of their line, right? And so fortunately, Bill Gates was able to go back and find that person. For me now, all I have is like positive stories that I've shared about my interactions with Superman that I had along the way, and people were blessed by some of those stories. I shared them, funny stories that they didn't know about him, and how close my bond was with him through a few road trips that he and I took. But it's like, take that time now, whether you know someone just through a simple greeting or the purchase of a newspaper or a simple interaction that you have with someone on a block. Take that time now, because you never know where their life is heading, good or bad, but at least you can invest in their life in some sort of way and bless them and extend that kindness. I think similarly, as I mentioned with Chris, Officer Frunze, right? He and I met on the front lines, and then now to find out that both his sons, young sons, are diagnosed with cancer, I don't know how I would be able to deal with that. And so again, that's just being able to extend that courtesy, empathy, and understanding for the people that are around us. And we just need to love more. We need to hug more. We need to understand what other people are going through. Life is tough, and to just acknowledge that as we meet people.
And if you're a follower or listener of this podcast, please pray for Officer Chris's sons, man. Do you know their names?
Chris's boys are Jackson and Bennett. I believe Jackson is 8. Bennett might be, I forget, because how many kids I have. I forget everybody's ages. But yeah, Jackson and Bennett. Officer Frunze, I believe. Chris is, I think he's a sergeant now at with the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department. So
we're gonna pray for Chris before we get off of here, because that's tough, man. So AJ, man, any parting words, man? Any nuggets?
Yeah, you both hit it right on the head. And I think it all comes down to spread love, not hate. There's enough negativity in this world. There's enough hate in this world. And at the end of the day, will you be remembered for the person that always has something negative to say about somebody? Or will you be the person that's always remembered for doing the right thing and being positive when people needed you to be positive? So just think about that.
Thanks, man. Real quick before we wrap it up, Officer Down Memorial, we didn't get a chance to get all the names, but I can't remember where we were at last time.
Wait, really quick.
Go ahead.
You said Officer Down Memorial. Is that like an organization? Yeah,
it's an organization that basically tracks every single officer that dies in the line of duty throughout the year.
Okay, so right before we started, I was sharing with you about the Thin Blue Line socks that I just made, right? Okay.
Plug that.
All right, so with these socks, and AJ, I got to get you a pair, but these Thin Blue Line socks, which are fresh, by the way, and they're really good quality socks. They got like this nice superhero thing to it. They're at hugsbrand.com if people want to check that out.
Oh, yes.
But a purchase or a portion of the purchase, there was like a fallen officers fund, but that sounds like something that's high tech that you're tracking on your app. I may want to get in contact with them.
We got you.
Okay, cool. For them to be recipients of a portion of the proceeds of this Thin Blue Line
I love
sock
that.
that we have out. So
I love that. And then what I'll do is, all of our listeners, if you guys there's always people that are passing away, and so maybe that might be something that we start, AJ, because we always talk about helping the families of those that recently lost somebody. So that might be a real connection. And so what's the website again?
Hugsbrand.com.
Hugsbrand.com. Go check that out, y'all. I got a pair of socks. I got a pair of the socks today.
You literally have one of the first pairs off production. They just got delivered.
Disrespect.
Yeah. Disrespect. And they're fresh, right? Like you
you know what? Hey. Yeah, we'll make a post. Hey, bro, don't be mad, bro. Hey,
I'm mad.
It ain't my fault you live in the boonies, bro.
That's it. You're in the real boonies now. For sure.
Yeah, it ain't my fault you live in the boonies. Hey,
so I'm going to drop a pair in the mail for you as soon as I get back, because I really want you to see the quality on these things. I'm not putting out some junk product. Like it's
I believe it. You don't got to tell me. I believe it.
Yeah.
Cool.
We are at 110 on the year. We've lost 42 officers by gunfire, 35 by auto-related accidents, and 33 others. I can't remember the last time we did our podcast where we were at, but I can just tell you that the list has gone up since then. The scary thing about this is that in past, when officers were dying in the line of duty, the main cause was auto-related, a lot of traffic collisions. So the mere fact that gunfire is the leading cause of officers dying is scary, because it means that people are becoming more violent. And so,
and that's an app that you're
yeah. It's called Officer Down Memorial. ODMP. Yep. So let me pray for Officer Chris's sons real quick, and let's get out of here. So, dear Heavenly Father, I come before you, and I just ask that you just be with Officer Chris's two sons right now that are battling cancer. Just give them the strength that they need, Lord, and just give them the miracle that they need to pull through. So that way, their story would just only be a testimony for the work that you've done and that you can do. So I ask that you give Chris the ability to have peace as he's going through it, and also allow him to have the ability to police and do his job with a clear mind as he's at work. And also I ask that you pray anybody else that's going through any medical issues wherever they're at right now, just bless them, Lord, just heal them, and just remind them that they're going through it for a reason, and that reason ultimately is to give you the glory in some shape, way, or form. So I just ask that you give us all strength, and just, if you're somebody listening to our podcast, I ask that you would encourage them right now to keep going, keep pushing. If they're suffering from mental health, suicidal ideations, whatever it may be, right where they're at as they listen to this podcast, I would just ask that you would touch them with love, allow them to know that you love them, but also allow them to know that we love them. So we love you, and we thank you. We ask these things for your son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Hey, y'all. Hey, Chris, man, I can't thank you enough, bro, for being here. We're going to have to do this again. Yep. Next time we come to San Diego, bro. Instead of looking at my hood room and looking into the hood, I want to be able to overlook some water.
Yeah, his place is nice. He let me in the garage. He wouldn't let me inside, but he let me in the garage. His place is nice.
Came in the house, man.
And I had to wipe my feet before I went in the garage. He said,
yeah, you can't come in. And so, and one of these days, bro, we will get out of our box, bro, and come to the boondocks of Columbus, Ohio, bro.
Y'all ain't ready.
Oh, yeah, I sure ain't ready, bro. I'm definitely ain't ready for that cold weather, bro. Y'all can have that. So, but we'll come out to you, bro. We ain't going to make you feel that bad. So, hey, guys, thank you guys for listening to our podcast. This podcast is being brought to you guys by Breaking Barriers United. A lot of good things coming. Conference time coming soon. And actually, as a matter of fact, I think we found one of our keynotes, bro.
Oh, yeah. No doubt.
I think we found one of our keynotes. If you're down,
no doubt.
He gonna charge us about $100,000.
No, come on, man. I'm not your boy. I'm not your boy.
I'm gonna need y'all to contribute to the kid hugs.
No, I'm not your boy. You know what though? I enjoyed this tonight, honestly. And if you didn't live so far out in the boonies, I'd be like, yo, have me on regularly.
Oh,
man.
no, and we can still make that happen though.
Okay, cool.
We can still make it. It doesn't always have to be. It only takes one, but we can make that happen because. Just like we got AJ connected, so all you need is, just don't have bootleg internet like AJ got.
Don't get me started.
I like the dynamic of even just being face to face. So I think wherever you're moving to next, if it's even closer to San Diego, I enjoyed having this perspective of myself not being in law enforcement, but understanding the work that you guys do, and then you guys being in law enforcement. I think it's a good balance. So definitely hit me up anytime.
Oh well, we're gonna have you on if you're not on the road. We definitely would love to have you on anytime, man. Cool. So good people. So thanks for listening to us, guys. We'll see y'all next week.
Awesome.
Peace.